Good morning. Uh-oh, I got a curly Q. Let's get rid of that. Good morning. This is Mark. I'm here in Lima, and I would love to share a devotional with you, kind of like a Bible study, actually. I'll probably take a little bit longer today, but I promise you I'll keep your attention. We're going to talk about how to vote biblically, So I'm going to take a sip of this coffee because I need all my wits this morning. All right. I may be a half-wit, but I still need it. All right. So anyway, hey, I want to share with you something from the Bible, how the Bible teaches us how to vote for people, what to expect, what to look for, what to expect. Also, I want to say that this isn't to endorse any candidate, because the only candidate this can endorse is Jesus, and but it's still a standard that we should be holding our political servants to, our civil servants too. And so I just want to bring a little bit of enlightenment as much as I can. I hope this is a blessing to you. So here we go. Let's go first here to Proverbs. Get the right setting here. There we go. All right, Proverbs chapter 28 and verse number 16. The Bible says the prince, first of all, we're talking about a governor. The prince. Remember that Proverbs was written by a king to a prince. We're talking about governors here. It says, the prince that wanteth understanding. When the Bible uses the word wanteth, it doesn't mean that he desires it. It means he needs it. It means he doesn't have it. The prince that wanteth understanding is also a great oppressor. Now, describing this prince and why he oppresses people, it says, but he that hateth covetousness shall prolong his days. That's the contrast. In other words, why is this prince that doesn't have understanding oppressing people? Because he's coveting what the people that have. But if we hate covetousness, we will prolong our days. Now, covetousness isn't simply wanting to be rich. It's wanting what belongs to the other person. It's not wanting what you can obtain by hard work and honest means. It's wanting something that is immoral for you to have. It is immoral for you to steal. It is immoral for you to violate, to kill. To commit murder, and so this person is always looking to have things by immoral means that belongs to somebody else. No. We should be hating covetousness. If something belongs to somebody else, it's great. If you're a single guy and you're looking at the girls and you're thinking, man, oh, she looks amazing, I want to marry her. She's married. Okay, boom. That the switch should go off and say, okay, well, she's not an option. She's married. She belongs to another man, and so on and so forth. Yes, as that man belongs to her. Okay, here we go. Let's go on here. So we have this prince here, this topic of covetousness. In the same chapter, we serve verse number 21. It says, to have respect of persons is not good, for a piece of bread that man will transgress. I see our voting system here, where people are passing out a bottle of beer or a free lunch or gift cards if they vote a certain way. What is that? That's respect of persons. That's giving a bribe and letting the person say, we're going to give you something. We're going to give you a gift. We're going to take care of you. And the person is blinded by their own vanity and cannot see what's really going on. What honest politician is going to try to bribe your vote? So if your vote is being bribed, be able to see beyond that and have some intelligence there and realize that respective persons, men for just a piece of bread will transgress and fall into bribery and vote for someone who they're not supposed to vote for, simply for a piece of bread or for a cigarette or for a beer. And however many times we've seen that, it's so true. So how should we vote? I want to look at several passages here. The first passage I want to look at is Exodus 18. Some folks think this is the only passage, but it's not. There's more. But first, let's look here at Exodus chapter 18. Now, in the time of Genesis, we have the king priests and these priests who governed the countries that were governed by priests. And we see that in Genesis. Melchizedek was a king priest. And Jesus is king and priest after the order of Melchizedek. Now, coming out of Genesis, we see the last of these king priests, one of them being Jethro, who was a governing priest over Midian. And this is, I don't know if necessarily called him a king, but he was a governing priest. It says, when Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, he's coming to Moses, he's going to visit him, and he sees exactly what's going on. And he's got to give him some advice. He's going to give Moses counsel on how to better govern the people. And let me tell you something. If you had over 3 million people thrown on you all at once, you'd probably need some counsel too. Here we go. Verse number 21. He's going to teach them how to choose men to govern over the people. He's going to choose. Now we have a choice. We have a vote. And Jethro, the priest governor, he's going to teach us exactly what to look for. It says, moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, and such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, and rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. And we see here the list here. First of all, it's got to be people among the people, so that there is no prejudices against the people as a whole. And so we have the people from among the people, such as able men. First of all, they're able men. It's really interesting. That word able in Spanish translates as virtuous men, men of virtue. And the virtue is the ability. They have the spiritual ability, the moral ability. They have the mental ability. They have the spiritual ability. They have the physical ability. They have the intelligence and the experience that they need. That's all wrapped up there in able men. If they're not able to do it, they should not do it. And how many times a man takes office when he really shouldn't be there? He's not able. He just wanted the office, but he doesn't know how to do it. And so first, he's got to be an able man, such as fear God. And he's got to be able to understand and recognize that he too has an authority. And a man that does not recognize his authority, he's looking for the highest office in the land because he doesn't want to be underneath authority. That's a terrible motive. That's a terrible motive. And a man that fears God is a man that can handle authority because he recognizes his authority. Any man of authority that doesn't recognize that God is his authority and that he has authorities over him is a completely unhinged individual who will damage everyone he's supposed to serve and help. Men of truth. These are men that tell the truth, and how the people long and moan for and cry for men of truth, men that will tell the truth. It's not just telling the truth in personal matters or in their own business, but in social matters, that we're not following the social pressures and responding according to political or social correctness, that we say the truth, whether it's accepted by the majority or not. We tell the truth. This is men of truth, hating covetousness. That's a big one, brother. Hating covetousness. Because why? They're going to be over the people, over families, over individuals. And so when we see a parent, when they choose someone to babysit their children, of course they're going to screen said persons. They're not going to accept anybody. They want someone that is going to hate covetousness, that's going to walk into their house and respect the things of their house and not rob them, and respect their children and not violate them. And they will choose someone very carefully that hates covetousness, that will not covet the kids, not be jealous of them. How many times we have seen rulers covetous of the very people? And just as we should be careful who we set to babysit our children, we should be careful who governs over our families of dads and moms and children. And so that they do not rob the people, not looking to take advantage of them, not looking to violate their country or their people. And so the same conditions. Now, the first thing that's going through your mind now is just, Pastor, come on, man. There are no options like that. Okay. That's the biggest problem with us today. We are faithless. We are without faith. So I want to challenge you as you're listening to this and thinking, good grief, nobody comes up to that standard. I want you to hold with me to the end, because we're going to talk about that faith, because it's all about our faith here. And I want to give you a practical application. All this is practical application. Now, as I said, this is not the only passage that talks about what we should look for in a candidate to vote for to govern over man. Understand that, first of all, everything is our responsibility. We have a civil duty, okay, but an individual duty. God, the first method he used to rule the world was over one man. And he gave Adam dominion over all the earth, to govern it, not just to beat on it, to govern it. The word dominion doesn't mean to dominate and beat down. No, it means to govern. He gave him dominion to care for according to the moral law, as God would, and love to God and love to your neighbor. And he set it over man. And we see that the first form of government over the earth is self-control, personal morality. And then we see it over the fathers, and the fathers ruled over. And then we see the civil government forming later on. And so we have the individual government, the family government, and we have the civil government. The civil government started with priest kings, where the rulers over these cities and countries understood their spiritual obligation to rule well. And now we're forgetting that. But God very much established since Genesis, and this is why the secular world hates the Bible, because the Bible teaches that there is no such thing as a secular world. Even our civil governments should be sacred, because they are sacred before God, and that's why he's a jealous God. And so on and so forth. And then we see, and this is where persecution comes in, because our civil governments don't understand this, that God has separated the church. It is a called out assembly out of these other formats, but not to disrespect those other formats. The church still recognizes and respects civil government, family government, and individual government. And that's why the forms of government that push the group rule, the majority rules, instead of the individual rule, and doesn't recognize the respect of the individual. They love to stereotype and say, you belong to this group, therefore you are, wow. That's the best way to justify genocide. And that's what's happening, genocides. And so, but they go to that group rule. You belong to this group, so this is automatically your mindset. No, God recognizes the individual soul liberty, and God recognizes the individual soul responsibility. And our society as a whole can be held responsible if we will hold ourselves individually responsible according to the morality of God, and not our own invented morality, and which would make us God, which is pretty sad, and it's idolatry and humanism and blah blah blah. Hey, sorry about the blah blah blah. Let's move on here. I'm getting a little off topic here, but let's look to what the Bible says. Back in Genesis, we see in chapter 41 that the Pharaoh in Genesis is going to choose a man to govern over his kingdom and care for a time of crisis. Now, understand that these kings in Genesis were God-fearing kings, and we see here in Genesis. Now, understand that the Pharaoh that didn't remember Joseph was in Exodus. So it was in Exodus that we see the corruption of the pharaohs. But in Genesis, they were still very much God-fearing men, warned of God in dreams. God came to them in dreams and said, don't touch Sarah. Remember that part? When Abraham said, tell him you're my sister. And God says, don't you touch that man's wife. And the pharaohs feared God and could discern, and God spoke to them directly. And verse number 37, it says, and the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants. What thing? We have Joseph interpreting the dreams and giving counsel to Pharaoh how he can take care of this process. Joseph is by no means trying to elevate himself. He's simply offering counsel and offering the interpretation and counsel how to care for it. He's not suggesting himself at all. And verse number 38, it says, and Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Now, the word discreet, reading in Spanish, it uses the word understanding. And of course, along the same lines. And so we see understanding and wisdom. Understanding, discreet and wise, understanding and wisdom. We see a man who has the Spirit of God, and we have a man who has understanding. He's capable of doing it. It says, for as much as God hath showed you all this. In other words, he knows what to do. He's a man who has the Spirit of God. He knows what to do. He has understanding and wisdom. And God and Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says, thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my house be ruled. A man of truth. If a man cannot speak the truth, how can he govern in truth? Because a governor governs by his word. Not by his fist, not by his sword. He governs by his word. And if what he says is lie, then his rule will be a lie. And that's very dangerous for the people. It would cause death and destruction. And so we see here these prerequisites for a man to rule. We see he has to have the Spirit of God. This isn't civil government, by the way. This isn't the church house. This isn't civil government. It's the same is true for the individual if he wants to govern himself, and it's same for the father if he wants to govern an autonomous sovereign family. It's true for the government that wants to truly be sovereign. It's true for the church that wants to be autonomous, and so on and so forth. We see here that they have to have the Spirit of God in them. They have to have the understanding, the knowledge of what to do, understanding and wisdom to how to do it, and the truth, the word of truth to make it happen so that it will stand correctly without corruption. And so that's for the governed. That's for the civil government. Now, I want to show you something interesting here. If you're still with me, if you're going to take this journey with me, let's look here. Sorry about the curly Q there. Let's look here in Acts chapter 6. What does the Bible say about the church and the deacons? Acts chapter 6, the disciples are looking for helpers and looking for men to help govern over the people. And they see right here in verse number 3, Acts chapter 6 and verse number 3, wherefore, brethren, look ye out among you 7 men of honest report. There is the virtue, the able men, full of the Holy Ghost, wisdom, whom we may appoint over this business. They can do the business. They're able men. They are men of truth. They have the Spirit of God, and they have the wisdom necessary to do it. And this is great because the Bible's teaching us clearly here that the same criteria, the same prerequisites for a man to lead the church is the same prerequisites for a man to lead a nation. That means God is putting, according to, and we can go to 1 Timothy chapter 3 as well, the same requirements for a bishop, a pastor, or a deacon, the helper of the pastor, his help. And when we say the requirements for them, they are exactly the same for the civil servant as well for the ecclesiastical servant. They are the same. And God holds the governor of the state to the same spiritual requirement as the governor of the church. All under God, men fearing God, recognizing his authority, as well as the governor for the family, which is the father, which is the husband, the head of the family, and Christ, the head of every man. And we have the individual who still, no matter who you are, what your title is, what your last name is, who you are, what you do, you still give an individual response to God. You can't put the blame on the group. It's not how it works. There is no stereotyping with God. There is no respect of persons with God. There's no respect of groups with God either. It's the individual has to respond for himself. That's both convicting and very scary, and should put the fear of God in our hearts. It does mine, that's for sure. Good grief. And God's good, and but He's also just. Proverbs chapter 8. Let's look at Proverbs chapter 8. Proverbs chapter 8 is all talking about wisdom. It's talking about wisdom, and it says here in verse number 15 and 16, it says, "By me," right here we go. "By me kings reign, and princes decree justice. By me princes rule, and nobles, even all the judges of the earth. And we cannot govern without the wisdom of God." And if we don't even recognize God in our secular viewpoints, how can we have the wisdom to govern? No, it will be completely partial. It will be completely partial, and it will be completely biased. Now, here's the question. Pastor, what you're describing is a fantasy, and we don't have those options. Okay, I want to talk to you in this point. Let me show you two passages. Stay with me, and we're wrapping it up on this. Stay with me here. So let's go to First Samuel chapter 8. Samuel had two sons, but Samuel's sons followed in the same footsteps as Eli. Unfortunately, Samuel was chosen to replace the sons of Eli because they were completely corrupt. But unfortunately, the only way that Samuel knew how to rear his sons was the same way Eli did, and his sons ended up the same way. And in 1 Samuel chapter 8, and it talks about his sons. They took bribes and perverted judgment, verse number 3. And let's go on to verse number 7. It says, verse number 5, it says, "Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in the ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations." And verse number 7, it says, "And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them." And they made their choice. Now, unfortunately, here ends the last of the king priests of Genesis. Samuel was the last governor. No, he didn't have the title king, but he was a governing priest over the people. They came to him to judge all, the last of the judges of Israel. And here ends the last of the priest rule over the earth. And now they go the way of all the earth, seeking a king, seeking to secularize their leadership. And he warned them. He says, it's just going to turn into more taxes. He's going to take your land, your women, your possessions, your food. He's going to take it from you. And they were convinced that was the right decision. And they got what they deserved. They got harder times. And let me say something here that's just going to sound so mean. It's going to sound so mean. But please understand, I beg you, this is the truth. We have to understand this. We will always choose. The people will always choose what they deserve. The people will always choose what they deserve, because God is looking at how we choose spiritually. And he always shows us through the office of our leadership exactly what we're really choosing spiritually. For an example, I'll use South America for an example. Here in South America, I'm in Peru. Here in South America, many of the South American countries have their elections on Sunday. When I ask around, why do you guys have your elections on Sunday? And they shut down churches for the time of elections, and it's illegal to have church. Why do you guys do that? Why do you guys do that? And they said, because we chose Sunday so that no one would have to give up a day of work. I said, then why does everyone work on Sunday? So either way, I said, so what you're telling me is that the reason why we put the elections in place of church is because of covetousness. We can't trust in God once every 5 years or 2 years for just one day of work. We can't give up one day of work to honor God. And I said, wow. I said, so our elections are based in covetousness themselves, what you can get. And for as long, the recompense for voting for the entire voting system to be based in covetousness, wanting the things that belong to other people, for as long as we vote in covetousness, our recompense will be covetous governors that will covet what the people have. And because we covet what the other person has, we elect people that will covet what we have and take from us. And that's how it works. We will always choose what we deserve. What we deserve. It doesn't matter who's in office. It matters who's seated on the throne. And Jesus Christ is King of Kings, and he still rules among men. And God has used wicked kings to do good things for the people of God. So it doesn't matter who's in office. What needs to matter is that Christians don't lose faith and fall into mischief. We need to rise up and fear God and trust in him. And let me go back to Proverbs again here. The counsel of the king to the prince. And Proverbs chapter 21 and verse number 1. And I'm going to highlight it here, brother, because this is what you need to know. This can give you hope. It says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, and as the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. Whithersoever he will. Doesn't matter who's in office. What matters is that we are humbling ourselves and praying and seeking his face and turning from our wicked ways. And then God can heal our land regardless of what puppet's in office. Excuse me, that was disrespectful. Regardless of what man responsible for himself towards God for all of his decisions is in office. But what that man doesn't understand is that he is more governed by God than he realizes. And God will always govern, and he will always give the people what they deserve. And we need to show God that we don't deserve anything, and we deserve hell and nothing more. And that if we can humble ourselves, that God can give grace to the humble. But meanwhile, he's got to resist the proud. And so walk humbly before your God and realize that God is still governing among men. Christ governs. Whether the world can see it or not, we should know it in our hearts and have faith. Don't lose faith, brother. And vote for the good, not the bad. And understand that in every election, and that should be it. Listen, how many times have we written a formal letter of protest to the way our government does things and the way that the men are in office? How many times have we written a formal letter of protest to the governor, to the state house, to the federal house, to the president, to your congressman, to your senator? How many times have you wrote that letter? I'm guilty too, brother. I sure am. And but you know what? Let's understand that the only reason why the governor of the state is not following the same spiritual standard as what the pastor should, or what the father should, or what the individual should, is because we've neglected them. We have neglected to hold them responsible. Who holds them responsible? The individual. We got to do our job. Regardless of anybody else, we got to do our job. God bless you. I hope this was a blessing to you. And for the meanwhile, pray for them. By all means, pray for them. And pray that God will do his work among men. And especially that he would use everything for the furtherance of the gospel. Because this life will end, and the next life is forever. Or the next death is forever for some people. And let's not hope that to be. Let's do everything in our power to share the gospel and to pray for all men. Hey, God bless you. I hope this was a blessing to you. I think I'm rambling at this point, but I hope that helped you with understanding how to vote biblically. Christians should vote with principles, good principles, and shouldn't vote with respect of persons. God bless you. Thanks for being with me, and hope you have a great day. And from Peru, ciao.